My name is Daniel, and this is not just another story about heartbreak. This is the story of how my fiancée tried to destroy me in front of everyone we knew, and how I dismantled her entire life piece by piece, using nothing but the same cruelty she had unleashed on me. I didn't grow up with money. I didn't grow up with connections. But I grew up learning something far more dangerous. I learned patience. I learned how to read people. And above all, I learned systems. And in my world, if you understand how the gears turn, you can make them grind down anyone. Valeria never understood that. And that was her fatal mistake. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. Our engagement party. 30 people gathered in a chic venue downtown. Exposed brick walls, craft cocktails, shallow laughter echoing under industrial lights. I had prepared a surprise for Valeria. A honeymoon designed just for her. She was obsessed with Korean culture, TV dramas, skincare rituals, barbecue, everything. So I planned 10 perfect days in Seoul, a suite with panoramic views, a tour of the DMZ, night markets, luxury dinners overlooking the skyline. $8,000, my entire savings plus credit. That night, after the toasts, I stood with a smile that barely contained my excitement. I held a folder in my hands. Inside were confirmations, photos, itineraries, everything. I cleared my throat. I want to share something special with you all, I said. Our honeymoon plans. The room quieted. All eyes turned to me. Valeria tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. I explained every detail, the restaurants, the tours, the skyline dinners. I waited for her joy, her gratitude, maybe even tears of happiness. But instead, her lips curled in disgust. "Are you serious?" she snapped. "You actually think this is what I want? Street food? Market stalls? Seoul? What am I, some nerd obsessed with cheap foreign shows?" Laughter erupted. Her mother smirked. Her sister shook her head like it was all so predictable. And Valeria walked to the fireplace, lifted my carefully prepared folder, and held it high. "This," she declared, looking at me with venom, "is pathetic." She threw it into the flames. Pages curled, blackened, disappeared. 4 years of my life, burning in seconds. The room erupted in applause. Yes, applause, like it was a show. Her ex, Andre, even raised his glass, grinning. Valeria smiled at him and purred, "Tell them about Positano." And in front of 30 people, she called another man love. I stood frozen, but I didn't cry. I didn't shout, I just watched, and something inside me went cold. That night, my best friend Camilo ran after me. He had filmed everything. Valeria's sneer, the flames, the applause. He said, "Brother, I have it all." Every second, I nodded. "Keep it," I told him. "It'll be useful." Because Valeria and her family didn't understand something fundamental about me. I don't break, I calculate. While they laughed at the boring bureaucrat, I had been the one quietly processing Hernan's property permits, Juliana's business filings, even Valeria's freelance licenses. I knew their weaknesses in black and white. That night, while they toasted to my humiliation, I was already fitting the first pieces of my counterattack. People underestimate paperwork. They think bureaucracy is dull. They don't realize it's the skeleton of everything. Homes, businesses, reputations, and I was the skeleton key. Valeria's design company registered under my address. Our apartment? Lease under my name only. Half the wedding contracts? Signed by me. Their family businesses? Dependent on my approvals and signatures. That meant I wasn't just her fiancé. I was the quiet guardian of their empire, and now I would become its executioner. The very next morning, I called the airline, explained that one of the passengers would no longer be traveling due to relationship changes. Surprisingly, they refunded over $3,000. Hotels, tours, most of it I recovered. By Monday, 60% of the money was back in my account. And that failed honeymoon became the start of a solo trip I would later take with Camilo. But that was just the beginning. That same week, I filed my resignation as Valeria's registered agent. In hours, her company was left legally hollow. I sent certified letters to her biggest client, notifying them of the change. They cut ties immediately. Then came Hernan. His commercial properties were riddled with violations. Blocked emergency exits, fake fire inspections, unapproved structural changes. I documented everything, submitted formal reports. Within days, inspectors descended on his buildings. Fines stacked up like dominoes. Juliana and her husband, their contractor schemes didn't survive a quiet tip to the Department of Labor. Andre? His investment advice was riddled with compliance red flags. A well-placed report to regulators put him in the crosshairs. The empire that had mocked me was now collapsing from within. Valeria tried one last desperate move. She sued me for $15,000, claiming emotional distress and illegal eviction. In court, she cried, wailed, accused. But she brought no evidence. I brought a folder with indexed sections, contracts, certified letters, statutes, every claim backed with documentation. The judge barely lasted 10 minutes before dismissing her case entirely. As we walked out, Valeria hissed at me, "You're cruel!" I looked her in the eye and whispered, "No, just precise." Months later, I took the soul trip with Camilo, the same trip she had burned in front of everyone. We laughed, ate street food, watched the city lights from rooftops. It was everything I had dreamed of, but with someone who actually wanted to be there. Meanwhile, Valeria was stocking shelves in a Cherry Creek store, sharing a cramped apartment with strangers in Aurora. Her design business was dead. Andre abandoned her when his license came under review. Hernan's properties were bleeding money in repairs and sanctions. Juliana's husband was under investigation. Their empire of appearances had turned to dust. 6 months later, I was out with Mariana, a woman who didn't measure love in car brands or Instagram photos. We were enjoying Korean barbecue when I saw her. Valeria. Cheap uniform, hollow eyes, bitterness etched into her face. She stormed to my table, raising her voice, spitting accusations. "You destroyed me! You ruined everything!" I calmly placed my phone on the table, recording. "In Colorado," I said evenly, "one-party consent is enough to record conversations." The restaurant went silent. She froze, realizing her outburst was now evidence. The manager escorted her out. The last image I had of her was standing alone in the parking lot, abandoned by the man who had once been her escape. I didn't destroy Valeria's life. I simply stopped holding it together. She thought appearances could save her. But appearances don't survive fire inspections, lawsuits, or regulators. She mocked me for being a bureaucrat. She forgot one thing. Bureaucrats know exactly which form can end your world.
My name is Valeria. If you've already heard another version of this story, I know how it goes. The steady, level-headed man in a modest job, betrayed by a shallow fiancé drunk on status, who dared to humiliate him at an engagement party. In that version, he turns the gears of the system and watches my life implode. He calls it justice. He calls it precision. I call it what it is. Two people mistaking control for love, and one of us deciding that control would taste better if served cold. Do not mistake me for innocent. I lit a match that night, but matches require friction. None of this would have burned if we hadn't built a house of dry thoughts and paper-thin promises. This is what really happened. From the side that bleeds, take a seat. It will take a while. That's the gift and curse of truth. It doesn't fit into a post. It sprawls like a city at night. I grew up where money pretends to be ancestry. Cherry Hills Village, where a new SUV is a weekly mood and quiet contempt is the local dialect. My father, Hernan, owns commercial properties downtown, the kind that look solid, but hide violations the way certain families hide affairs. My mother's name is Gloria, a woman who can tell you everything about leather grain and nothing about forgiveness. My sister Juliana married a tech oracle who speaks in coin tickers and brand prophecy. If that sounds like a parody, it's because the script wrote itself long before I was born. Then there was Daniel. He wore crisp shirts without peacocking, could name the month a city ordinance changed and the year a code book was last revised. Like other men recite football stats. When he first touched my wrist, he did it the way inspectors test a railing. Firm, careful, certain. He valued safety. Safety felt like love to someone, raised on the volatility of image. People online say I picked him to rebel against my families. Shallowness. Maybe I also picked him because I liked the way he looked at me when I wasn't performing. Eyes that solved, not shopped. A woman like me, curated since birth, gets tired of mirrors that only reflect brand. But safety has an underbelly. Ask any child who learned to keep the house clean for fear of the slam of a door. Ask any woman who mistook control for devotion, because both feel like attention. We dated 4 years. He handled permits for my freelance design work, applications I never learned. Because why should I, when love offered to read the fine print? He also helped my father, my sister, my world of glossy eggshell lies. He kept everything compliant, on paper. It was our joke. He's the skeleton key. Keys open, yes. They also lock. When he proposed, the ring looked classic. The word he used was sensible. I said yes. Sensible, I told myself, is how you build a life that doesn't fall apart in the wind. But wind tests scaffolding. And ours had rust. Engagement party, exposed brick, Edison bulbs, curated playlists, rented laughter, 30 people and 1 folder. I watched Daniel hold it the way some men hold newborns. He cleared his throat and smiled the smile of a man about to present a flawless plan. Trailers, confirmations, laminated pockets of proofs. He was about to reveal our honeymoon. Soul. I felt the room tilt. Don't misunderstand. I love Korean culture. The dramas saved me during winter depressions. The skincare routines felt like a slow daily prayer. I wanted soul. but I did not want it performed for our audience like a slide deck. I did not want street markets and budget bins announced to a room full of my family's worst instincts. I did not want to be a trophy for his competence, a stable itinerary to prove he was better than the trust fund men I used to date. All I heard, under his words, was a calculus. Look, everyone, I, Daniel, who read the contracts, can also read the woman. See how correctly I have scheduled her joy. People cheered before I spoke, because that's what parties are. Applause machines for the person holding the microphone. Andre was there. Yes, the X. There are X's who haunt, and there are X's who orbit. He was both. Too well-timed, too cologned, too full of Amalfi advice. I'd said we were friends, and sometimes that was true. Sometimes I used him as an argument against becoming invisible. Both can be true. Both were wrong. Daniel finished presenting. I stared at pages of confirmations. Like they were tests. I was already failing. Something ugly rose in me. The reflex of a woman who learned young that the first to speak the cruelest line sets the rules of the room. I called the trip pathetic. I said street food. I said the unforgivable word nerd with a sneer. And when I saw the shock, a human face breaking, I made it worse. I walked to the fireplace. I fed it the papers. Flames clutched glossy print and ate it like candy. Now you want me to say I felt instant remorse. I didn't. Remorse is the delayed cousin of terror. What I felt was a clean surgical silence. The silence of a theater audience, watching a villain take shape in real time and deciding to clap because the villain is entertaining. They applauded. I fed the beast. I looked at Andre and said, "Tell them about Positano." I called him love. It is possible to be the executioner and the condemned in the same act. If you've never been both, you haven't loved like I did, fighting to be seen and choosing a flood because you're terrified of drowning. Slowly, I burned his plan. He never raised his voice. That is the scariest kind of man. The party continued without me. Parties do that. They celebrate whatever's easiest. I smiled, posed, laughed too loudly, and then I went home. No, I sat in a friend's car and watched the city lights smear. I expected a text from Daniel, a fight, a thread I could tug on to keep us bound. Nothing. Silence is a blade you don't notice until you move and it opens you. When I finally got back to our apartment, he wasn't there. The folder was ash. The room smelled faintly of paper breath. I left messages. Cocky, defensive, then desperate. I said, "You should have asked what I wanted." What I meant was, why didn't you see that presenting my joy to my mother is the same as handing her a knife? What I meant was, why didn't you understand that I wanted to choose with you, not be chosen for? But humiliation is a drunk translator. It mangles every language into accusation. The next morning, he called airlines and tours. I know because confirmations vanished from our shared inbox, like beads cut from a thread. Refunds trickled. The trip mutated into a solo ticket with his name on it. Systems purred their compliance. Machines love order. Machines always pick him. He also resigned as my registered agent. That's the sort of sentence that sounds like paperwork, until you realize the ground under your business is paperwork. Clients receive formal notices. Confidences curdle. My biggest client paused payments, then severed ties. Suddenly, the address under my company name no longer belonged to us. Suddenly, I had no legal hand to hold. He gave me 30 days to leave the apartment. I'd lived there 2 years. I paid groceries, utilities, comfort, but not the lease. You think that's parasitic? Maybe. Or maybe it's how women raised in empires learn to live. Worth measured in presence and image, not contracts. I didn't realize not being on paper is the same as not existing. When he spoke to me that week, he spoke like a clerk, serving the end of a world. Calm, precise, deadly. 30 days, Valeria. That's lawful notice for a guest. He called me a guest in my own life. You want details? Dark channels want texture. Here. The first night I slept at Carolina's place. Her cat hissed at me like it recognized smoke. I dialed Andre. He said, "Breathe, the way men say. Please don't cry in my ear." My mother called to ask what I'd done. And then, in the same breath, to say maybe Daniel wasn't so bad after all. He always got the boring things right. Boring things like home. We praise boring longest when our houses start to shake. My father said, "Leave the legal to Daniel until this blows over." He meant, outsource your existence to the man who just pulled the plug on it. Meanwhile, the city began to knock at my father's properties. Violations, inspections, citations. I don't need to draw the line for you. The timing drew it in permanent marker. I called Daniel. He said, soft as a winter blade, "Safety is not personal. The city does its job." I said, "The city says your name." He said, "Then the city has noticed me." You know that feeling when you realize you have been sleeping next to a map and never learned to read? That Juliana's husband received letters that looked harmless and sounded federal. Andre stopped picking up my calls for entire afternoons. I watched men who had smirked at Daniel's job begin to whisper about compliance, like it was a god they suddenly remembered to worship. The world stood up straighter around him. I bent. Let me offer you something most people don't. A confession that doesn't ask for absolution. I burned his plan because it was perfect, and perfection is a trap. It leaves no air for preference. It says, "Here, your joy optimized." I've pre-approved it for safety and sentiment. It says, "Be grateful or be wrong." I burned his plan because I was angry that he knew me through spreadsheets better than through the messy, unbrandable parts of me, the nights I hate myself, the fear that if you hand me a blank page, I will draw a cage, the way my mother's compliments cut deeper than her insults. I burned his plan because in my family, the first person to humiliate gets to narrate. I wanted to own the story. I chose fire over conversation, spectacle over intimacy, a room over a man. I burned his plan because I recognized in him the thing I'd been trained to admire: control. I saw how it would grow. I saw our kitchen becoming a courthouse, where he would lay out binders labeled Valeria's best interests, and I would lose my life in an index. Maybe you think that sounds paranoid. Maybe that's exactly what happened next. "I'm not evicting you," Daniel said. "You were never a tenant. The difference is legal. The impact is existential." I tried being small. I tried apologizing. I said I'd pay back the flights, even though my bank account couldn't make principal out of guilt. I asked to talk without witnesses, just us. He offered time slots. Thursday between 4 and 5 should work. 4 and 5. I set alarms for our relationship. When we met, he stood behind the kitchen island like it was a bench. He let me speak. 10 minutes, 20, while he watched my hands as if cataloging tremors. He asked about Andre. He asked about Positano. I said the wrong words in the right order. He asked if I'd called Andre love. I said yes. Each answer slid into a slot I couldn't see. And then he said, "Thank you for your candor," as if I'd filed a report. When you love someone who thinks in forms, honesty is evidence. He left that afternoon and submitted, somewhere, to someone, the version of me that would move the gears. He resigned as my agent. He notified the client. He called the landlord. He became, with frightening ease, the state. You will say the state protected me too. After all, women need systems when men are wolves. True. But systems have no eyes for nuance. They protect what they can measure. They measured my absence on a lease. They measured my business by the address under it. The system saw Daniel. It did not see me. As the city moved through my father's buildings, I visited him to be the good daughter. He looked smaller in his office. the leather chair swallowing him like an elegy. He muttered about jealous inspectors and petty enemies. He didn't say Daniel. He didn't need to. I said, "Fix it," and he laughed, because that word means two different things to men like him: patch and evade. He had always been excellent at both. The city prefers verbs, like comply. My mother called me hysterical and asked why I enjoyed ruining dinner. Juliana texted, said I had been cruel at the party, but that Daniel was escalating, as if escalation isn't the natural consequence of lighting a fuse in a room full of dry plans. Andre took me out twice, in a bar that looked like a banker's confession booth. Dark wood, low lights, drinks with cubes that shone like black ice. He gave me the speech men keep ready in their pocket for emergencies. You're not crazy. You deserve more. You're powerful. He kissed me once, gently, like I was a witness he didn't want to spook. Then the regulatory whispers reached his firm. His calls shortened. His patience thinned into professionalism. He explained, with the tone of someone breaking bad news to a distant coworker, that he needed space. Space is the English word for a woman losing value. I learned the translation late. That week, I read articles about paper abuse, about using bureaucratic tools to isolate a partner, controlling leases, addresses, certifications. I saw myself footnoted. I saw my name in the margins of every ordinance that said I didn't exist. Do not misunderstand me. I am not saying Daniel hit me with the law. I am saying he withheld me from it and then reminded me that outside the lines, you are a ghost. He didn't invent those lines. He just knew where they cut deepest. I sued him. Small claims, the kind where you think the word small will keep your heart from breaking open on the stand. It didn't. I stood in front of a judge who carries the same expression for tax disputes and frayed vows. I cried more than I spoke. Carolina squeezed my hand from the bench like we were at a funeral. Daniel appeared with a folder, so organized it might have been carved, not assembled. Tabs, exhibits, certified mail receipts stacked like teeth. He spoke gently. He was never cruel. That's the genius of it. You think cruelty requires volume. It doesn't. It requires inevitability. I lost. Of course I did. The law asked for documents I never had. Lease agreements, receipts in my name, evidence of tenancy. I had dinner photos and bath towels, and 2 years of Sundays. The court cannot adjudicate a ghost. Walking out of the courthouse, I saw my reflection in the glass. A woman who had confused love with access. Access to what? His address, his influence, his ability to make the city nod. I learned something under that fluorescent light. Some men don't need to raise their hands to feel powerful. They raise their filing fees. You think I kept nothing. You think I ended in a cheap uniform in a shop whose mirrors refuse to flatter, living in Aurora with a roommate who watches her shows too loud. All true, for a time. Hell doesn't need new torments. It recycles the same three: noise, humiliation, exhaustion. But I also kept a box. Inside, Camilo's photos of me in the moment before the burn. My face not cruel but cornered, like an animal counting exits. A note from my father, written years earlier in Spanish. The only time he ever apologized. Not to me, but for me, to an investor. That's how I learned apology, is a currency that circulates outside the home. The melted metal clip from Daniel's folder. I picked it out of the ashes after everyone left. It had warped into the shape of a question mark. I kept those. I needed proof that I had existed beyond a docket number. I also kept anger, not the kind that explodes, the kind that condenses into a choice. When Daniel asked Andre to meet for coffee, I knew before Andre told me. Daniel has a voice he uses when he's loading the chamber. Pleasant, professional, unassailable. He invited Andre to discuss policies, which is how gentlemen warn each other. Andre asked me if he should go. I said yes, because curiosity is stronger than fear in men whose careers are built on confidence. He returned shaken, laughably defensive, as if Daniel had threatened him with a paper cut and he'd seen an artery open. He stopped calling me after that week. I stopped calling him the same day because I don't need instructions to leave a man who only loves me in rooms where I am winning. I still think about that coffee shop, the little bell on the door, the foam on cups, the way people type on laptops, believing they're safe from each other. One day I stood across the street and watched couples negotiate their lives with gentle smiles that hid ultimatums. We do so much harm quietly. Gloria said, "At least now you know what life is. Documentation." She meant, "At least now you know men have better contracts than women have stories." She meant, "I told you not to humiliate him in public. Men don't forgive witnesses." She meant, "This will make you respectable. Pain does, if you hold your spine right." She invited me to dinner and corrected my posture while I cried. She said my mascara was waterproof and proved herself wrong. She suggested I write Daniel a letter, not to ask, but to respect. Respect is a word mothers use when they don't remember how to say love. I wrote nothing. For once, I let the silence be mine. I took the job in Cherry Creek because folding sweaters gives you a script for your hands when your heart has too much unscheduled time. Customers ask for sizes, and you climb a ladder. You spend breaks Googling tenant rights and reading articles that say your situation is sadly common. A legal negative space where you were present but not presentable. The manager told me I was overqualified. I smiled and told her I was overcomplicated. She said the uniform would simplify me. She was right. Uniforms are kind. They erase your life for 8 hours. Then you clock out and your life grows teeth again. I shared a place in Aurora with 2 women who never asked questions, for which I loved them. They left me notes about shared chores with smiley faces that somehow never felt passive-aggressive. I learned the satisfaction of things done and crossed off. Laundry, groceries, vacuuming, not crying in public. Sometimes I rode the light rail and counted stoplights just to feel the sequence. The mercy of systems that don't hate you personally. Yes, I saw him, months later. He was with a woman whose laughter made the metal chopsticks look warmer. They were at a table where the grill smoked like an altar. He looked lighter. It offended me that he had lightness. I said awful things. I wanted to yank the narrative back, the way a child grabs a doll from the floor and declares ownership by volume. He placed his phone on the table, recording. He said Colorado allowed one-party consent. Of course it does. Of course he knows. The manager asked me to leave. I left without screaming, because I have learned that cameras have no interest in whether you are right. They see only angles and decibels. Outside in the parking lot, I stood for a long time staring at my reflection in a car window. My uniform, my smallness, my mouth forming excuses that evaporated in the mountain air. The man I came with drove away. That was fine. There are departures so complete, they save you an evening's explanation. I walked 2 miles. I think the sky looked kind. What happens after the spectacle ends? I got therapy. That sentence doesn't make good thumbnails, but it saved my spine. I found a counselor who specializes in the intersection of love and paperwork. Women trapped by leases and licenses and letters. She asked what I wanted to keep from Daniel. I said, the folder system, but for myself. She laughed and then didn't, because she realized I meant it. I made a binder. Inside, proof of address in my name. A registered agent from my new LLC, not a boyfriend. A firm that charges me regardless of my eye makeup. A small savings account labeled FIRE, not because I intend to burn anything, but because naming money after its origin reminds you a flame taught you the value of water. A list titled, Things That Do Not Prove Love. surprise trips, public gestures, the word sensible, tolerance, humiliation followed by flowers, leverage. I wrote a letter to Daniel that I never sent. It said, "You were right about safety. You were wrong about mercy." It said, "I was wrong about spectacle. I was right to fear cages with velvet locks." Then I rewrote the letter to myself and signed it. He paid the fines. He bragged about beating the city by complying. Only a certain kind of man thinks fixing violations is a victory over the inspector, rather than a victory over fire. We ate dinner 3 months later, as a family, and no one spoke Daniel's name. We chewed around it, set knives down around it, toasted around it. My mother showed me a new bag and said it was an investment piece. I wanted to ask which regulator approves value in leather. I didn't. On the way home, I drove past one of my father's buildings and saw a new exit sign glowing the way regret does. Belated, red, undeniable. I realized I didn't have to hate Daniel to keep walking. I could despise the method and still choose the light. 2 truths, finally reconciled. He made sure the doors opened. He also pushed me out. Both can be true. People online pick one and call it justice. Life is not online. Andre texted me a photo of Positano months later. I blocked the number and then, in a moment of weakness, unblocked it to send one line. "The View does not forgive the man." He wrote a paragraph about second chances. I no longer buy paragraphs from men who expense their own redemption. I reblocked him and felt nothing dramatic. No long-haired aria of triumph. Just the soft click of the door staying shut. In my apartment, my roommate Ava asked if I wanted to watch a show about people cooking quietly. We ate noodles and watched steam curl like punctuation. I slept without dreams that night. The rare mercy of a brain too tired to generate metaphors. I had to tell this part carefully because it sounds like I'm proud. I'm not, but it matters. One day, I printed a photo of the fireplace from the engagement party. The one Camilo apparently took, where the flame bends around the corner of a page that says, "Reservation Confirmation." I stood on my tiny balcony, held a lighter to the corner of that photo, and watched the flame kiss the paper with less hunger than I remembered. I dropped the ash into a mug and poured water. Water makes a sound like a yes when it hits hot ash. This time the burn was mine. Private, small, controlled. No applause, no audience. Just me, a ceramic cup. A ritual that turned a spectacle into a lesson. People talk about closure. It's a key. It's more like a window you learn to open on humid nights. What would I tell the woman I was at the party? Folder in her hands, crowd breathing. I would say, do not humiliate the man you love in front of witnesses. Humiliation is a multiplier. It turns one mistake into law. I would say, ask for a pause. Take the folder to the bathroom. Sit on the closed lid of the toilet and read the pages and cry, and then go back out and say, "Thank you. Can we talk later?" I would say, you are not weak for wanting private choices. You are not boring for wanting quiet joy. I would say, if he always thinks he knows better than your fear, leave. I would say, if you want to be consulted, learn the language of the forms. Do not outsource your existence. I would say, if you accidentally break the person who loved you because you were breaking, apologize like someone who plans to change, not like someone auditioning for forgiveness. I would not say don't burn it. Some fires teach you the shape of your life. Mercy is not a court ruling. It's not even an apology. Mercy is the choice to step away without building an altar to your suffering. I chose not to retaliate. I could have filed complaints of my own, pressed on the spots I knew would bruise. A coworker here, a timeline there. I did not. Not because he didn't deserve pain. We all do, if pain is the coin. But because I was tired of living in a ledger. Let him keep his narrative online, in whispers, at dinners where his new love laughs into chrome chopsticks. Let people say he is a hero of paperwork. Sometimes he is. Sometimes I needed him to be. Mercy is living where his name is not a door you have to pass through to reach your kitchen. I promised you a long story. I owe you the ending. I left retail. I rebuilt my studio with contracts I sign, addresses I pay for, deadlines I honor without an audience. I take on fewer clients and everyone laughs more. I learned taxes the way I once learned makeup brushing. Small strokes, patience, blending. My studio is small. It is mine. I keep a plant alive. You have no idea how radical that feels. After years of putting bouquets in vases to rot elegantly, sometimes at night I think of Seoul, the DMZ tour, the rooftop dinners, the night markets. I bookmarked all of it again in a folder named Later. Not someday. Later is a promise I make only to myself. I'll go when the trip is not proof, when the skyline is not a backdrop for revenge or redemption. I'll go hungry and unfilmed. I'll eat on the street and not care who sees. The binder on my shelf has a spine label in black marker. Life. It's unironically dorky. It's perfect. Inside are copies of everything that once vanished under his fingers. They don't make me safe. They make me visible. I sometimes wonder if Daniel ever opens a folder and thinks of flame. If he ever recalls the smell of ash and paper sugar. If he remembers that silence is a knife. I hope he is happy. This is not graciousness. It's self-preservation. I don't want to live with a man in my head whose unhappiness feeds me. I want to eat my own food. Online, the moral is clean. Don't humiliate a bureaucrat. He knows which form ends your world. From where I sit, the moral leaks. Don't mistake control for love. Don't outsource your existence. Don't turn a conversation into a demonstration. And when you fail, and you will, don't feed the fire an audience. Fire eats applause for fuel. If you came here for vengeance porn, I'm sorry. My revenge is boring. I pay bills. I read contracts. I correct my posture in chairs that are mine. I do not bring men to restaurants to perform my grief. I keep a plant alive. The last time I saw the engagement venue, it had been renovated. New paint over old brick, prettier fixtures. The kind of modern that thinks it erased the past because it updated the bulbs. I stood on the sidewalk and laughed in the smallest way. Buildings learn. People try. I wish I had not burned his plan in front of everyone. I wish he had not used the city to teach me a lesson. We both turned love into paperwork. Mine dramatic, his documented. We are both guilty. We are both free. And if you need a sentence to take with you into your night, and I know this channel likes trophies, take this one. I am not the villain he became by surviving me. I am not the victim I became by surviving him. I am the woman who learned to be legible to herself. That's the whole story. Take from it only what keeps you from lighting a match you cannot put out. And if you ever do light it, have water ready.